From the heart of Africa's entrepreneurial frontier, Founders Battlefield returns with episode 8, Image over Impact, Why We Brand Before We Build. In a world of LinkedIn headlines, glossy pitch decks, and global panels, we ask the hard question: are we building real companies or just curating images? Host Michael Masharian knows this tension well. His personal brand has powered every venture he has led, from 7 Seas Technologies to Ponea Health and now Founders Battlefield. He's joined by Jesse Moore, co-founder of M-KOPA, who scaled one of Africa's biggest B2C brands while staying intentionally off-camera. Wandia Gishuru, co-founder of Vivo, built a retail empire without being the face, proving that visibility isn't always the value. And Ian Ngede, founder of Razor Resource Group, shows how low-profile founders can still build high-trust ecosystems. Together, they explore the pros and cons of founder visibility, when it accelerates trust, when it backfires, and why in some industries it's essential, while in others it's irrelevant. This is Founders Battlefield.
Good morning, everybody. We are here back at Founders Battlefield with our episode 8. And we're very excited because I have received significant feedback on the other episodes, and we keep on optimizing the show as we go along. So thanks for your insights and feedback. And today, our episode 8 is an interesting episode. It's around how to build a brand as a business. Do you build the founder's brand, or do you build your business brand first? And what should speak as a brand? Is it quality of your products? Is it output vis-a-vis the brand of an entrepreneur that drives the brand of a business? So with me today, I've got amazing guests who are really in the heart of this kind of conversation. With me, we have Wandia. Wandia is one of the people I'm sure all of you guys know in the fashion industry. I'll get her to introduce herself shortly. We've got Ian. Ian is in learning solutions for corporates to help corporate leaders become better champions, and some of the corporate leaders who eventually become entrepreneurs. And we've got Jesse. Jesse is a good friend of mine, driving a product in the country today across East Africa, I would imagine. And I'll get him to introduce himself. So without further ado, can we maybe quickly go through introductions? I'm Mike Masharia, founder at 7 Seas Technologies and Ponea Health, and really keen to drive conversations with entrepreneurs that shape the future of our future in terms of giving our stories in the way that other entrepreneurs can learn from us. So without further ado, we can go to Wandia. Wandia, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Pole, and thanks for coming. It's a very cold morning, and you guys are here. I was talking to Jesse. Jesse took a swim at 7 o'clock, 7:30.
Wow.
And then we had breakfast, so great. And Wandia already had a meeting. So these entrepreneurs are operating at a different frequency. Wandia, over to you. Maybe you can quickly do an introduction and about your business, and then just set in context in terms of image over impact. Should we brand before we build?
Wow. So you want to jump right in?
100%.
Okay.
Yes.
So thank you for having me here. Excited to be part of this discussion. My name is Wandia Gishuru. I'm the CEO and founder of Vivo Fashion Group, which includes a number of fashion brands: Vivo, Safari by Vivo, and Zoya. And we also have a fashion dedicated marketplace, Shop Zetu. And yeah, if I had to sort of say where I stand on that, as far as I'm concerned, I think that the business should be bigger than the entrepreneur in terms of the brand. It doesn't hurt necessarily to have a personal brand that, if that can help the business. But I would hope that most of us are building brands that can live beyond our personal lifetimes and even our personal reputations. I think businesses should be bigger.
Interesting.
And last longer.
We will come to that because Chanel as an example, or Hugo Boss, we will talk about how that has transitioned. And again, as we say in this show, it's been extremely authentic about what we would have done differently, right? So we'll come back to you one day. I'm going to come back to you with some hard questions. And then Ian, over to you, Ian. Ian, I know for very many years. When I was 22, I met Ian. We're just talking with Ian earlier. We went whitewater rafting in Zambezi, is it? No, Zambezi, right?
It was Zambezi, yes.
Zambezi, and it was one of the most difficult things we have ever done in our lives. I think I would have died. I was 22 years, right? We had gone there in the Vic Falls, right? We went rafting, no practice, no nothing. So that was an interesting experience. Ian, nice to see you. Later, 7 years, 10 years. How many years? 20?
More than 20 years.
20 years.
I think it's 27.
27 years. Yeah. Wow, I've known you for that long.
Sure.
Jeez. Okay, Ian.
Great. Thank you, Mike. My name is Ian Ngede. I'm the founder and director of Razor Resource Group. And Razor Resource Group is a performance improvement company. And what we do is we work with teams, with individuals and organizations to help them achieve measurable results. And the way we do that is through behavior change. So our training, helps them to change behavior in a way that allows them to drive the kind of results that are required in the organization. And so we work in 3 different areas in terms of the solutions. One of it is personal and interpersonal skills, so anything to do with project management, meeting management, and presentation skills. And then we have an area in leadership and culture, so anything to do with trust, change, performance management, engagement, and things like those is a bucket that we work at. And then the final area is what we call business outcomes. So if an organization has an X to Y by when, a project or strategy, then we have a process that helps them to get them to their why and by when. So that's what we do as a business. In terms of my thought about whether we should be branding, before we build, I think any business that can have the visibility and it also has a solid back office in terms of operation, I think that would be a great intersection of 2 very important things: branding and substantive operation going on. In my case, with the limited resources that I had starting the business, I felt that I needed to focus on the substance before the visibility. And I remember when I look at my story, before we started the business, I had the opportunity to work with some big corporate multinationals. And I worked for the Gillette company, I worked for GSK, I worked for HP, and I worked for a company called Reckitt Benckiser. And one of the things that struck me about my bosses was the level of humility that they had in almost each of the companies that I worked with. And I remember in one of the businesses, we had a really huge marketing and PR budget. And I remember going to my boss and saying to them, boss, would like to feature you in all the newspapers and, a TV show. This obviously came from the PR company, And I said, we want to feature you and show how well you've done for the business. And he looked at me straight in the eye. And he said, Ian, it's not about me. It's about our brands. So if we can put the money into our brands and make sure that they are known, but also that they're delivering the promise, that's the most important thing for me. And so that was a seminal moment for me. And it taught me a lot in terms of, brand of our visibility. And so that's just one lesson I learned in the corporate world. I think the other lesson that the other side where I learned a lesson was being a student of Jim Collins. So, Jim Collins wrote a book, Good to Great. And in that book, Good to Great, one of the things he did was a research of 1,435 companies. And he was trying to figure out, what separates the good companies and the great companies. And, after 4 years, he came up with a conclusion. First of all, he managed to isolate 11 companies that he called great. And great to him was defined by the fact that they were turning over 6.9 times better results or returns in the stock exchange than the peer companies. But now, when he went to look at what it is that made them great, he discovered that there was a level of leadership at the executive level that he called the level 5 leadership. And he discovered that all the leaders in those 11 companies had a paradoxical mix of humility, but they also had an intense professional will. And so, these were people who were very, very ambitious, but the ambition was driven into their businesses and not to their personal brand at that time. And also, these people were, very interested in having successors. So they were working on a pipeline of leaders to succeed them because they saw the business as going beyond them. So those were the basically foundational sort of lessons that I've had amongst many others that have made me feel that it should be first the brand, first the substance and the business, and then the visibility comes later.
We'll come to that. Again, as I said, we don't have any right or wrong. So I'll question, is it a culture issue also? If you're American or you're European or African, do American brands tend to be founder-led, than European brands? Maybe, I don't know any Japanese founder by name, but Japanese brands tend to go first as a product brand, not the founder brand. American brands, a lot of founders, American names. So we'll come back to even, is it at an African level, how do you build can you build a brand, right, independently without you as a founder? But we'll come back to that. Jesse, you're Canadian, and you're in a market in Africa. You've built a great business, and you continue to build a business that attracts or serves the middle market or even lower market. So it would be interesting to hear from you, and as introduce yourself, your perspective on this.
Sure. First of all, thanks, Mike, for what you're doing generally with this whole series and platform, and thank you for the invitation, and great to be with you guys this morning. I got about 17 thoughts already from what Wandia and Ian have already offered. Briefly, as form of introduction, Jesse Moore, co-founder and CEO of M-KOPA, Canadian originally, but I've called Nairobi home for 15 years now, and originally came here to work on M-PESA in 2007, and then moved here 2010 to start M-KOPA. M-KOPA, the mission of the company is to finance progress for everyday earners, which is to say the population on the continent that doesn't have a monthly paycheck and therefore is usually excluded from financial services, particularly credit. We run a technology-driven credit platform for consumers that starts with asset financing. And today, mainly that means financing smartphones to everyday earners. Historically, we were somewhat known as a solar company. We financed a lot of solar panels. And we're just starting financing also of electric motorcycles. So we've done multiple product categories, but in each case, it's financing a productive asset for an everyday earner in a creative way using mobile payments and other technologies. And it's gotten to a decent scale now. I still think it's small compared to what we could do, but we've reached nearly 7 million customers over the last 15 years, and those are spread across Kenya, Uganda, Nigeria, Ghana, and South Africa. So we have 5 offices, about 3,000 employees on the continent, servicing these 7 million customers. To the question you asked, the first thing I wanted to say was I've been thinking about it for 4 days since you sent the note around to us in the WhatsApp group. And I think the thing about really good questions is they always have the same answer. And the answer is, it depends. Yeah, it really depends, which is not a way to cheat, out of answering the question. But really good questions are so complicated to answer, so it sort of depends. The other thought I had was the classic proverb of if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together, right? And I think there's a parallel there in this equation of founder brand or company brand. And Wandia, you sort of already alluded to this. If you want to build a long-term brand, a long-term company, you're sort of in that category of going together, right? And Ian, as you said, when working in these big corporates where they're far beyond any individual, it's the brands of the products that matter. It's the brands of the companies that stand the test of time. To me, that's probably the way to build for the long haul. So going together is to go far. That said, if you want to go fast, there is something powerful in an individual founder's brand that can help you accelerate. And so I don't know if I would say it's so much American versus European versus African versus Japanese, although that's an interesting lens. When we really, or at least when I really look at the founder brands that are super powerful in the world, a lot of them are tech, right? It's a lot of tech brands. It's your Mark Zuckerbergs and your Elon Musks and your Masa-san, to go to Japan. That's a very individual brand. I think he's Korean actually, but Masa-san, and Vision Fund and SoftBank, it's a brand of him. But all of these businesses are very much technology. And in those cases, so much is changing so fast. It's almost as if the market, the investors, the staff, the partners can't keep up with the vision. And so they just end up saying, well, this person must be a genius, and therefore their brand kind of takes care of people's, decisions to back the company. So it's a way to go fast, but I think it's also full of risk, in particular. And let's look at Elon Musk this week, or this month. Here's a guy who people have backed just because he's Elon Musk, and now people are dropping him just as fast because he's Elon Musk, right? So I think that the individual brand thing can go very quickly, but it can go wrong as well. So those are my initial thoughts. Although I also think, and I don't know Wandia very well, or your I know your brands. But I think in fashion and some of these direct sort of style and consumer-facing businesses, it may be quite different than tech. So those are my initial.
Interesting, and I think we all operating on the basis that you've scaled your business already, right? At the point of scale, 7 million customers, one year, or with very many shops, even having expanded to the US. Your first initial ideation now is around where you are now as a business. So let's dial back and think your starting days when you started M-KOPA, when you started Vivo, when you started your business, right? Because we're also talking to an audience that is also trying to scale their business, right? So think about when you started your business. What was that conversation you had with yourself? It's easy now to look at your business from what you're looking at. Like Ian, for instance, you're doing training, but when you started training, your content, if you think about your content that you train, is from American companies or from global companies. You did not say, this is Ian Inc., this is my content, this is me, I'm training you my content. You've leveraged, at the inception, brands, global brands that have helped you build your brand. Correct?
Sure.
If I think about Jesse, he saying, I started with Safaricom, M-PESA. So would you, then that's the basis on how you build your business. So think about it. So there's a way that the big brand like Safaricom will help you leverage your brand. Correct? And when I come to Wandia, I'm not sure. That's an interesting question for Wandia. I'm not sure what was going through your mind at the inception of your business. So maybe I start with you, Wandia, and then you guys can jump in. At the beginning of your business, how do you structure it, knowing very well that how will people buy? How do you raise capital? Did people buy your brand? Did people invest in you because of your brand, or they invested because of you?
I mean, I think, in my case, I didn't have a brand. I mean, I wasn't known for anything.
So you're the brand?
No, what I mean is when we were starting Vivo didn't exist. No one obviously knew it, and no one really knew Wandia at, outside of friends or people who had just my own personal network. And unlike a lot of, so they're fashion designers who build a brand. Typically, they'll even name the brand in their name because it's their creativity, it's their designs, their design house, the house of Louis Vuitton or the house of Giorgio Armani or whatever. I don't come from a fashion background, so I wasn't the designer trying to build a brand around my designs. And so there was never an idea of calling it Wandia or anything like that. And so when we started, it didn't even occur to me. I never thought that I need to think about the business, and then I also should be thinking about the brand of Wandia and how does that relate to the business? It never occurred to me. And so when we launched our first store, people thought it was a global brand that had just come to Kenya. They were like, where are these things from? You know, which country? Where we haven't heard of this brand Vivo. It must have come from somewhere. And so we were like, no, it's a Kenyan brand. We just came up with a name and launched it. Having said that, it sort of over time as the Vivo brand, and it was really when we started to produce locally that we started to get media coverage. Because then that became the story. Oh, this is a made in Kenya brand. Who's behind it? And so I would be asked to, be interviewed or to have an article in the newspaper. And then people wanted to know who's behind the brand. And it was only 5-6 years into it when I was invited to be part of a show on television, Lion's Den, that I would say the Wandia brand started to then become a little better known. But till today, 14 years into it, I still meet a lot of people who know Vivo and have never heard of me. Very few people will know me without knowing Vivo. Yeah, but as in people, when it's not that the Wandia name is out there. The reason it's out there is because it's associated with Vivo. But there are very many people who shop at Vivo, still do not know that it's a Kenyan brand and have never heard of me. So
it's an interesting. Everybody I said I'm going to interview Vivo, they said, "Yeah, Wandia,
yes.
the light girl with interesting hair, talks well." That's what, to be honest.
So
there's no one who didn't know. I've done my acid test. So I am surprised. It's interesting.
Occasionally I'll still meet people and they're like, oh, they've heard of Vivo and they're like, oh, you're the person behind Vivo. And especially men who don't shop typically at Vivo, or younger people. So they'll be like, yeah, I see my mother carrying those orange bags with the name Vivo on it. And when we're in the mall, she wants to go into that store, but they don't necessarily know much about who's behind the brand.
So as we move ahead, so are you telling me that you, as you said, if you originally are in the design space, you'd build a brand, then in some cases people would name the brand under their banner, great. But your business must have scaled through raising capital, the usual growth patterns of a business.
Yes, but it was purely on the product. So first of all, the initial investment was our savings. So we didn't raise from anybody for a few years. And by that point, by the time we were looking to raise, it was from primarily friends and family, and on the back of having demonstrated that it's an economically viable business and they could see the numbers. So we didn't go out to market. And even now, when I speak to investors, they're not that interested in the brand of Wandia. They just want to see, is this a good business? Is it solid? What's your plan? What's your strategy? What's the opportunity? Have you demonstrated that you know how to capture it? I mean, it's not about, I think it's very different. I think these days, and the difference between perhaps 10, 15, even 20 years ago is now with things like social media, there are many people who have an incredible personal brand. So they may have millions of followers and a lot of traction, a lot of engagement, but they haven't figured out, how to turn that into a product, merchandise, or, whether it's owning a content type product like Oprah does or whatever else. I see a lot of people who are sort of saying, well, what do I do with this now? So other than getting paid by corporates to do advertising or marketing for them, what is it that they can own? And so I've worked with a number of people who have wanted to turn that brand into a fashion brand. So I think if you're coming from that direction, then very much you're known more than any sort of product or business that you've created, and perhaps over time. So I look at like the Kardashians. Now a lot of them have gone into beauty or into fashion, And those brands have their own names. Skims, a clothing line that Kim Kardashian owns. She will use her personal brand to build, knowledge and awareness about Skims. But over time, I'm sure Skims will become its own brand that maybe some people won't even know where it started.
I'll come back to you, but I would like to leave the question as we move into Ian and Jesse. If tomorrow your company listed, you're in the stock market, and our newspapers or The Economist or whoever was to put a face, would the IPO focus on your business, or would your face be the face on the magazine cover? I'll come back to that conversation, because at that point, people are going to be saying, when you go IPO, will they amplify your company? Will they amplify you as an individual? I'll come back to that. Ian, you build a business. You leveraged global content, right? So in one way or another, when you go and sell, you'd say, okay, this content is from this global company, right? How has that worked in terms of building your brand?
I think that was a very critical part of building the brand. When I started the business, I think the critical question was, should we develop the content locally, or should we reach out to global IP? And, we debated around that. And, one of the things that, one of the decisions we made is that it would actually add more value if we focused our efforts on getting the business known as opposed to our efforts in creating content. And we did try to create content. It's very time-consuming, extremely expensive. There's not enough research in our country and in Africa to create, some of the content that we needed to create. And so when we look at the main driver of, why our business grew, I would say it was a little bit away from me as a founder. And the reason for that is I remember when I founded the company and had been in corporate for many years, and I was living as a marketing director of one of the big companies. And when I made the knocks to the CEOs of now the companies that we wanted to sell to them, they would welcome me to their offices, but I could tell that they were not willing to buy. And why were they not willing to buy? It's because this guy, we've known him as, this brand manager, product manager, marketing director.
Okay, tell us.
That's where he's built his career all his life. Now he's coming to tell me that he'll change around my company and, help us move X to Y through leadership and performance, solutions. Will he actually manage to do it? And so in the initial, I would say 5 years, the people that I knew very well, the people that I could leverage my contacts, did not buy from me. They did not buy from us. Because they needed to sort of make sure that I had gotten it right before they, put their necks on the line. Because if you're the CEO of Bank X, you don't want to put in your X amount of millions to this guy who's just gotten into the business. So we leveraged more on being a global brand. Having global content, but also we named our company, we looked for a coined name. So Razor actually means raising performance. So, so we're raising. And it was intentional to have that name so that, if we went to Rwanda or Uganda or in Kenya, there wasn't too much debate about who the founder is, or who the owner is, or who, and actually we pivoted into those markets about 2 or 3 years after we started. And there's no way I could have driven my founder brand in 4 markets at the same time. And so I think coming back to your point, we leveraged more on our systems, our processes, our content, and our people more than we did on the founder. Now, the founder thing started working, like I said, much, much later when people realized that we have a really good product. We would go into a company, like Jesse's company. Jesse doesn't know me.
They realize over breakfast, you guys, you do a lot of work for him.
Exactly, I do a lot of work.
But
with
you
him.
don't know each other.
No,
I
we-
found that fascinating.
You see, I wasn't confused that this was a marketing guy trying to pitch me training, so it was easy.
Yes,
It was
yes.
easy. It was just a good product.
Exactly, and someone went and sold into that into M-KOPA. It's not me who sold it. And
But there's something you've said. You said that when you started, there are guys who are not willing to give you an opportunity because you're not proven. So you leverage global content that was branded. That's how they give you projects. That's a very important tipping point that you need to agree that you need to be branded with a global brand for them to give you business.
So I'm not in a disagreement with you on that. I think here what my point of contention is your personal brand. So there are two things here. There's your business brand and your personal brand. So the business brand, for sure, we enjoyed the leverage of a global branded content to be able to drive our business forward. But in terms of my personal brand and visibility, initially it wasn't working because when I went to, like I said, to Jesse, and Jesse knew me for another career, he wasn't willing to invest yet until I got proven. So what I'm saying is that for me, the main driver of our success in the initial years was more around the business, the substance of the business in terms of the content, in terms of the operation, the process, and making sure that we're delivering to the client promise. Now, if I get the opportunity to be extremely visible, I'm sure that everybody who comes into our business will actually get their promise, the promise we have delivered. And I wouldn't have a problem with that. What I would have a problem with is having an amazing personal brand, and when people come in, we're actually not delivering to the promise.
Fair enough. We'll come to that in terms of a branded. But then there's a conversation we had over breakfast that came up, and you said, and you talked about Stephen Covey. Stephen Covey is an individual who has built an individual brand. That individual brand has created a company brand that you train on. And in the conversation, we also said, Jesse said, I like Steve Covey. It's one of my favorite, whatever. But Steve Covey is an individual who has built a brand. Other people are using his brand as an individual globally. Is that correct?
So let me tell you a quick story about Stephen R. Covey.
Okay.
So great leadership guru, amazing in terms of his insights. And he believed that life is made up of principles, and that if you lived life through principles, then you never go wrong. And so he was a big thought leader of the mantra of that we needed to start from the inside before we went to the outside. And one of the research he did was he found that 50 years before our time, people are more grounded in terms of the inside out way of doing things. So their values, their character, their ethos were much, much stronger in the older days than it is today. And so when someone, if you remember in those Western movies, when someone says, I've given you my word, he gave you his word. You didn't need to sign a contract. But today there's too much focus on the personality. How do I look? What do I own? Where do I stay? So that's a big thing that's coming. But back to Stephen Covey and his business, he actually was drowning after trying to go out into the world as his own personal brand, because he was very, very passionate about leadership. And he would go to tens and tens of countries, including Kenya, to come and speak about the 7 habits. But guess what happened? His company almost collapsed. And he was speaking to us, and he taught us that mission without a margin is not mission.
Without?
A margin. Mission must have a margin. So
Profit,
a profit, basically. Mission must be able to fund itself. Mission must be able to produce money and value for it to be successful. But he forgot about that. He got carried away by the mission. And so for him to turn around the company, he needed to step down and sell it to Franklin Quest. And that's why the company is now called Franklin Covey. And when he sold it, he brought in, or they brought in, or the merger brought in professional CEOs and finance leaders and all those kind of guys. And that's how the company became a big global brand, quoted in the New York Stock Exchange.
Interesting. It's an interesting area you are in, because I'm thinking, as we go to Jesse, is it a bit, the two dimensions. There's business to business, you are selling to a business, and there's business to consumer. Wandia sells to consumers, Jesse sells to consumers. You sell to businesses, I have done both businesses. I've sold to consumers and I've sold to businesses. And as you have that conversation, I'm thinking, does the industry you are in matter in terms of how you brand it, individual brand vis-a-vis company brand? And I go to Jesse from our point of view. I really like to first deep dive a bit around M-KOPA. M-KOPA is a company that is highly admired at scale. You've done 7 million customers. You've been already in South Africa, right? M-KOPA. KOPA is a Swahili word. KOPA is a Swahili word. You've gone to South Africa where KOPA is not KOPA is not a Swahili word. So I'd just like to understand your journey, especially at the beginning, and how you think brands like Safaricom helped you build your brand.
Yeah, it's a great question. And a lot of what I was thinking as I was listening to you guys is the question of brand building, to me, can fall across 4 different stakeholder groups, okay? What is the brand you're building for customers? Whether they be business customers or direct to customers, and what type of customers. But customers is obviously probably the key group when we think about brand. But then investors, right? Who are the shareholders and the investors, capital providers, whether it's friends and family or private equity or the stock market, that's another brand segment or sort of a different category than your customers. Sometimes they can be the same. I assume, maybe Apple's a good idea, where the people who can afford iPhones are probably also the people who can buy stock in Apple. So maybe there's a confluence there of customers of Apple and investors of Apple. But for many businesses, your investor base and your customers are totally different. And you have different brand concerns and needs to satisfy those 2 ends. Yeah. Third would be staff, I think. Your employee brand, right? What is it that you're selling to talented people to choose to join your organization and stay with your organization? What is that brand about, and what does that feel like? And then finally, partners. And that's a big one. It can, again, depend on your business. Is it your suppliers? Is it government? Is it partner organizations you do business with? All of these things can also be important brand dimensions. And at least in our case, I'd say we have quite different needs across those different segments. So coming around to your question, Mike, on sort of the M-KOPA brand, and you've alluded to the connection with Safaricom. There was a very purposeful decision 15 years ago when we were starting the company to name the company M-KOPA. I remember I actually had to put in a call to Bob Collymore at the time. I said, hey, Bob, you know what we're planning to do? We were planning to work together with Safaricom. And I said, we're going to name the company, if you don't mind, we're going to name it M-KOPA. This is available in the market. There's no trademark on this name. But we're doing it because we expect to be doing business with Safaricom. And it would be helpful to us to ride on the coattails of what is a established brand in the market in M-PESA. And because all of the customers are going to use M-PESA to pay for their M-KOPA services. So we actually went to Safaricom and sort of said, we hope you don't mind. And I remember Bob saying, yeah, no, that I don't mind. That's good because we are trying to enable M-KOPA as a partner to Safaricom. So in a way, the brand comes from this partnership, so to say, between Safaricom and M-KOPA. And again, many of us that started M-KOPA were working with Safaricom on M-PESA before. So there's a real brand lineage or heritage there.
Great.
Coming back to consumers, the 7 million customers of which, a little more than half of those are in Kenya and a little more than half are in other markets. In Kenya, I know that there is a connection made not only to the Swahili aspects of, the word KOPA, people understand that means to borrow, and the M-KOPA necessarily suggests to you it's something digital, it's something with M-Pesa, and it's something affiliated to Safaricom. In a way, that's all purposeful. But yeah, you go to Nigeria, it doesn't mean anything, right? It's a brand new name. Now, luckily, it doesn't mean anything bad in local Nigerian dialects or anything like that. But we've had to create just a brand new consumer brand in those markets. So there's been a different challenge, I guess. But we started with the M-KOPA brand and decided when we were expanding to other markets, it was kind of neutral, I guess. It didn't jump off the page in a market like Ghana or Nigeria or South Africa as meaning particularly anything. But it worked well enough that we could build around it, and it was easier to keep the same brand across the markets than have different brands. Anyway, the thing I'm thinking through now, and as we talk about brand and then the founder and the company, these different dimensions of your customers, of your shareholders and your investors, your partners and your employees, I think each have a different treatment, where sometimes the founder is the right brand to lead with. Other times the product or the company name is the right brand to lead with. And I think in our case, with our customers, it's very much led by the company brand. I don't think I know many customers don't know who I am, because I meet them and they're like, "Who are you?" Right? And I say, "Oh, I'm Jesse. Who are you?" "Oh, I'm Mike. I'm your customer." Great. So many of our customers would not know much about the founder of M-KOPA, which is just fine. And I don't think they need to. There's not much to gain from them knowing that. What's important is they know the product is good, the brand is quality. It's about trust, right? I think we've established very strong trust with our customers, and that is classic consumer brand building work. When it comes to our employees, however, I think and maybe this is also because there's another dimension we can tease out. There's the founder and there's the CEO, right? And I think all three of us are both. Uh-huh. But sometimes those become different things over time. So the founder brand towards the staff is one dimension, and then the CEO brand towards the staff is another dimension. And I think we can always say that the CEO of a company has to have a strong personal brand, maybe not their personal life, but the individual who's the CEO of any company is going to be a big positive or negative for the employees, right? This is our leader. This is the person we follow. This is the person we're looking to for direction. So the CEO's brand in the workplace, I don't know, it feels to me like it's essential. When that CEO is also the founder, then you have two brands that are concurrent. It's like, hey, Jesse, you're the CEO today. You're making this decision on what. How do I feel of you as the leader of the day-to-day business? Overlaid with the fact that, hey, you're one of the guys who started this, and you know all the history, and you made some decisions early on, and there's a bit more of a mythical side of like the founders and what happened and how the business got to this point. And when you're founder and CEO, you have to juggle both of those brands or both of those bits of identity, in the same day.
Oh, wow, it's an interesting. I think it's interesting. I just thought about it, because as a founder or a CEO, talent will also be attracted to you because of your individual brand, especially senior management talent. And it got me thinking that there are multiple dimensions to this brand conversation. One, you can tag along a bigger brand, which then helps you grow. So you really align to a bigger brand, as you said. The second thing, you can create a movement where a brand could be built around a community where you become a movement. And now what happens? The movement is driving your brand, correct? The next one is and an example of that is Equity Bank with that I'm a member campaign. Remember, a lot of people got bank accounts, I'm a member campaign.
Brilliant.
Well, Equity, at that point, when James Mwangi, if you think about it, was not well known in those circles. I'm a member became a movement which built Equity. Then now, eventually, Equity and James Mwangi then blended. You see, that's the journey. And sometimes you don't even want it, just happens, right? The next one is need-based. Like what you said. you're providing a need like M-KOPA. People want solar, people want financial products, in the end, whatever, how you guys have evolved. That then becomes a need-based product, which then builds a brand. I think like what M-KOPA has done. Then I think you then have what we call personality cult kind of brand. As an individual, as a founder, you're almost like a personality-led, because there are some brands that have built through personalities. So Elon Musk, for instance, is an example of founder personality cult kind of brand. Is that correct? So I would like to dovetail now into an interesting conversation around at what point do you think, have you guys experienced, now it's a personal really reflection, at what point do you feel your personal brand has ever been in conflict with your corporate identity? Has that ever happened to you guys? Where your personal brand and the corporate brand have eventually at some point had conflict? Maybe, whether it was shareholders, maybe I could help you, maybe I could start. And if I look at my journey, starting a business when I was 22, my business, 76 was 20, I was 23, 24, I think 25, 25. I would go and try and sell technology too. First I did finance. So trying to sell technology, like you said, Ian, earlier, people would ask me, what? You're a finance guy. What do you know about technology? So I highly leveraged global brands. Global brands like Cisco Systems, global like IBM, global brands like Oracle. So when I go to a customer, I would say, I'm selling this technology product. So they would say, okay, the next question would be, who have you done it for? So you see, again, my brand, the company brand, had to be associated with somebody else I've done it for. So it's very difficult because I could imagine me trying to sell that product would have been very difficult. And I can also imagine any software developer today trying to sell for your product. You'll first tell them, my friend, are you sure? Who have you done it for? So you can see already our conversation to other founders is telling them how difficult it is to start. Where do you start? So when we then started building that brand, the next question was, which customers do you have? Because people buy from the customers that. So if you drop, I've done it for Safaricom, I've done for KCB, people say, we are willing to give you a chance, right? Then eventually you realize that if you don't start building your individual brand, you're at the mercy of these other brands. Because at some point, the brands that you represent start suffocating you. So you're unable to build a brand. And if they were to take the brand away from you, right, what happens then? Who are you as an organization? That also became an evolving challenge for us, because if you then lose, right, let's say you decide I'm not going to back IBM anymore, what happens is, who are you as a brand? So that we went through that whole phase, and we realized our brand had to become projects we've done that we can endorse and put a rubber stamp to, whether it is your Builder Huduma Center. So now it's no longer I'm an IBM partner, I'm a Cisco partner. I'm talking about transformation projects that you've done. You see, that becomes now our brand. Subsequently, and I like what you said about human resources, the whole journey of how you build talent, and we had a talent show on episode 6, the employees start building your brand for you. Because, it's almost like a push and pull. Other good employees attract other good employees. So at some point in the university, it was, have you not worked for 7 Cs? If you left JQuat as a BTech student, the first place you need to work is, you need to work at 7 Cs. So your brand naturally attracts talent to work for you. Eventually, when we moved, I tried to do B2C. For me, I really had to rethink this B2C. How is this B2C? There's a very, very steep learning curve. But also building a B2C business in the digital age where you've got social media platforms where you can amplify your business, that also is a whole conversation in itself. I'm sure, and I would like to actually, that's what I want to dovetail to as I go to Andia. If your business is like maybe 15 years? 14. Yeah, a good guess. So 14 years, what if you were to rebuild this business today with the kind of platforms we have, technology platforms we have, how would you have done it? Because you build it when technology were not in social media. Today you can amplify. I can build a brand. In 1 year, I can build a brand that you've taken 14 years to build. It's possible, right? I think. You can get known.
Get known.
Get known, right?
As to build a brand.
There are two dimensions. There is brand and there is actual capacity to execute on the brand, right? So let's say you're going to start this business again. With what you know today.
I think with what I know now, I mean, it would depend what I'm building towards and for. So you asked a question earlier around, what if Vivo was to try and list, let's say. I think in a market like this, if you're trying to convince individuals to become shareholders and to buy stock or whatever, then yes, having a face that they recognize, they trust, they believe there's some credibility around that would matter. I think if you know that you're just trying to sell it to a strategic at some point, what they're interested in is a profitable, well-built, well-run business. So I don't know how much the personal brand would matter. In fact, if anything, they might think that that's a bit of a liability, because if we take it on and you're no longer part of that, if people are only buying because they associate it with you, that might not be seen as an asset. I think for me, I would still focus on the primary product and service. And I think the personal brand is just icing on the cake. And so I would still want to, I'm a big, big believer in the need for Africans to own our own brands. I mean, as much as it's great that we can build off of global brands and, piggyback and whatever, I think the problem is we don't own enough of our own brands. And if I look even in the fashion space, a company like Deacon's, when we were starting out, Deacon's was one of the few Kenyan fashion businesses that had been around for 50 years, but they didn't build it around their own brands. They owned franchises of Woolworths, of Mr. Price, of some of these other brands. And then what happens is they brought those brands to the market, they took all the initial risk, they built the market share, and then the companies bought them back and said, okay, actually, you know what, we've changed our business model. We don't, we now want to go direct. We want to own those markets directly. And so it was one of the things that I think brought Deacon's down, because they lost all the main, I think at one point, half of their revenues was coming from Woolworths alone. And so when Woolworths decided they no longer wanted to have a franchise model, what was Deacon's left with? So I think, and again, that may be just in the space that I'm in, but I think the power of owning our own brands is where a lot of the value, the more lucrative value gets created. So we can be producers of other people's brands. We can bring other people's brands to market and own the sort of franchise part of it, or we can build brands that we can then take to other markets. M-KOPA going to Nigeria, it doesn't matter whether the name means anything. What excited, I'm guessing, the consumers there is the product at the price point and what value it was bringing to their lives. And so, yeah, I don't know if I've answered the question.
Yeah, interesting dynamics from the way you explained it. But then, so you're saying that if you listed, and you're going to come back to the second question. If you listed, you're saying that in a market like this, if you're raising money, if you put Vivo in our stock market, what would you be selling? Would you be selling your transformational journey as a female founder who's built a significant business?
No, I would still be selling the product and the Vivo, the brand, that we will have demonstrated. Maybe this will be 20 years into the business. We would be able to show the lucrativeness, the profitability, the fact that this is a brand that's going to keep growing, that you're going to earn a lot of dividends from, that is a good investment. But I would still be the person telling that story. And so, if that brings a bit of attention, that's helpful. But I think the story still, the thing people will be investing in is the strength of the brand Vivo.
Interesting.
I think another way, and I liked what you said about these different groups of who the brand matters to. And I think, at the point that I'm at, part of the reason that I still put some time and energy into my personal brand is because I think it's more from a sort of a bit of legacy, but more importantly, like, where can you have impact? And you know, I love to speak to entrepreneurs. I mean, the reason we're even doing this kind of show is because there are people out there who want to build businesses or are building businesses and are constantly looking for guidance, inspiration, mentoring type advice, and it's difficult to do that on a one-on-one basis when you're busy. And so that's where I think a personal brand can be very impactful in an environment in which there aren't that many examples. And especially as a woman, in a space that I believe there's huge opportunity, but there haven't been that many good examples. I welcome chances to share some of the journey and some of the lessons learned and encourage other people. And so nothing excites me more than when I meet people who say, you know, I watched your journey and therefore that you know, gave me the confidence to try and build something of my own. You know, and so I think from that angle, and I think a lot of us are trying to do this, where we're saying, you know, and it comes from a philosophy of the more you know, the more you owe. You know, what can we give back? How can we help that next generation? And how can they learn faster than we did?
100%. Yeah.
And be able to do in 1 year what took us 10 years to
14.
do. So I think from that angle, the personal brand is very powerful, because people will listen to stories and they'll connect to stories.
Exactly. So I'm thinking, and we still have a second question to answer. I think if I was to buy stock, I would buy stock. If you're to list your business, I would buy stock. There are two kinds of people who speculate. Others buy because the fundamentals are right of your business. Others will buy, wow, she did this, I'm have to support her. If she can do this, she can do the next big thing.
They'll put money there.
Yeah. Elon Musk, people put money because of Elon.
Okay.
100%. His business fundamentals don't make sense. People say his businesses are loss-making. Is that correct? But people are putting significant capital under his brand. I think that's what happened.
But I think it's because they think it will pay off. They think he's this genius, whatever. I don't know that it's just because they really like him and want to support him. I still think they want a return. You know, people will still, I mean, they may go to an event where he's speaking because they want to support him. But I think where people put money,
But people have put money behind Elon. You guys tell me. People have put money behind Elon as an individual.
Absolutely.
No, so that's what I'm asking, guys.
Without trusting that they'll get
Mike,
100%.
I think Mike is right. A lot of people look at, you know, companies sentimentally. And so the sentiment is, you know, Elon is this larger-than-life guy. You know, he does amazing inventions. He's loud. His company is loud. And therefore, I want to be associated with him. And so I'm going to put money in there. So there's a lot of stocks that are bought because of the sentiments more than the fundamentals.
Okay.
The only thing is, I wonder if Jim Collins was to study Elon Musk's company, when trying to look at the good to great, you know, trying to have that conversation of good to great.
But remember, a lot of Jim Collins companies, they 11, some of them 50% have closed.
Yeah, but that was 20 years ago. He did this research 30 years ago. So,
Agreed.
So obviously there's a lot of transformation, even in terms of, you know, the human beings that are running those companies. And the time he came up with that result, he was talking about the human beings at that time and what they were doing for those companies. I think Elon Musk would not qualify to be one of that great company.
But we are now here. We are here.
Yeah,
Huko tulitoka.
No, that's what I'm saying. No, that's what I'm saying. I don't think, like you said rightly, that Elon Musk's company have the fundamentals that are required to run a business for the long term. So if you're buying shares for the long term and you're looking to stay in a company for the long term, I suspect that Elon Musk's companies are not the place you should put your money in. I mean, look at things like even his personality. What would happen to SpaceX or to Tesla without Elon Musk? Look at Twitter or X when he entered there and brought in his overbearing personality. I mean, the business has completely, well, let me say completely, but it's really like lost value. And so my thought is that people are buying shares into Musk's companies just because of the sentiments of who he is and what he's done before. And that's why they're also fleeing as fast as they came in. Is that the way we want to build our brands as founders? Do we want to have a brand that is top for 10 years or 6 years, and then, 15 years down the road, there's no legacy? So that's a question really we need to ask ourselves as founders.
It's a good point. We will come back to that conversation. And but Jesse, what's your take on this? I think we have many balls in the air for this conversation, right? And there's no right. We're not trying to come to a conclusion. This is the way we'll do. No. That's not. I don't think so, right? What's your take on this? Because I want to ask another controversial question. And we're coming back to Vivo to tell us if she was to build a business with the digital era today, how would she do it from a brand point of view?
Okay, one thing on the digital era thing, I was thinking about your question before about the M-KOPA brand and going into Nigeria. And when we went into Nigeria with a name that wasn't familiar and didn't mean anything to the average Nigerian customer we were trying to reach, how did they first, and this is now 2021, so in the fully digital social media era, how did the average, Lagosian everyday earner who is considering to buy a product from us establish brand credibility? They went into their phone, they went on Facebook, and they were like, what's this M-KOPA company? And it was the social media presence that had been built organically, I would say, in Kenya by our customers that legitimized the decision to purchase in Nigeria. We knew we were on, we had a little bit of a purposeful social media presence. We at the time, we didn't have much of a social media team, let's say at M-KOPA. We had a bit, but what we had was a lot of Kenyan customers who were on social media saying positive things about the product.
So it's a movement.
So yeah, more like a movement. Yeah, and I love the mention of the equity member movement. That's genius. That was absolute genius. Anyway, we got some credibility in Nigeria because literally people would look up the Facebook pages in Kenya and say, okay, well, Kenyans like this. I'll give it a try. I digress a little bit. Back to the latest question. One thing I'm thinking about here, and Wandia, you were really making me think of this when you were talking about your own company and journey, but as founders, we all know that this is a tiring journey, right? It's wonderful to build a company, but it is all encompassing to build a company. And then when you put your brand out front and use your own identity to build the company, you really lose a lot of freedom because it's all in. You almost can become captive to the brand, right? Everything you do is now a reflection of your product and your company, right? You're out for dinner, you're running in Karura Forest, you're at school picking up your kids, whatever it is you're doing, you're now on. And it's one of those things we don't maybe talk about enough. If you work for a corporate in an executive role, even, I think you have that ability to shut it off, to sort of do your job and then be you. But when you are bringing your whole self into the brand of the company and the identity, there's very little opportunity to be invisible. And for those people who are brave enough to do that, I really credit them because I think they are all in, and they are exposing themselves in a serious way that sometimes is not appreciated. Right? It's not appreciated enough. What a bold and brave thing to do, to put your own personal identity on the line on behalf of the company you're trying to build. I mean, that's really incredible stuff. And I don't do that. That's not what I've done. Sounds like Wandia, you're doing that a lot more. And I really respect people who are putting their whole selves and their whole brand into personal brand, into a company. I think it's incredible.
So touching on that, do you think, so you talked about how you immerse your brand, and everywhere you go, people talk about it. It's a big problem for me. But I've sort of accepted it. But then I'm thinking, as you're saying, and one day I can see one day is sort of trying to detach herself from the brand. Is it a personality issue? I'm thinking Michael Joseph, For a very long time, Michael Joseph and Safaricom were synonymous.
Yeah.
People believed and people knew Michael Joseph and Safaricom. If Michael is behind Safaricom, I even think Bob struggled initially to plug into that. And they kept saying, will he fit in the shoes of Michael Joseph, right? Subsequently, Michael Joseph has gone to take another assignments. And the reason why maybe he's taken other assignments, like KQ, for instance, is his persona as an individual was, I can crack it. Is that correct? So his brand became very connected to Safaricom, if you think about it, right? Then you look at James Mwangi, same kind of conversation. So is it a personality issue? Well, look, do you need to be a red, in the red zone as an individual for you to want to be at the front, as you said, it's a sacrifice, or it just happens? Do you think it's maybe a personality nature of an individual for you to lead from the front as a brand, or what do you think?
I think personality also plays a great part to it. And so if you are a more, I would say, less extroverted, personality, then it becomes harder for you to every day be trending on digital media, just because that's not something that you personally enjoy. So to answer your question, it's a big yes. Personality is a big thing, and it does play to it. Just like whether you're doing B2B or B2C also plays to it. So there are a number of factors that will favor you in terms of whether you're, basically going out loudly visible.
And I'm interested you've said about Nigeria. I've done business in Nigeria, and I found it interesting that personality of the founder is such a big thing in Nigeria. I'm even impressed you've broken through that market. That, Tony Alumulu equals UBA. The Zenith Bank equals this person. So by the time, Glow equals this person. So in the streets of Nigeria, by the time I spent time there, I knew like all these people. I've never met them. Maybe I met Tony several times. But some of these guys, this brand equals this individual. Nigeria is a very big in terms of cult, kind of founder driving adoption. Okay, Kenya, I'm not sure. Kenya is interesting. I've just tried to write names of people I know who drive brands. I think it just occurred to me it's Michael Joseph, James Mwangi. Who else? Do you know anybody else?
I think in Kenya it's an interesting mix, because if you just segue a little bit from corporate, and look at whether it's mega churches or your political space, or people who are running mega financial schemes to for people to buy land and stuff like that. Those people actually pivot because of the publicity around them. And that's part of the challenges I think we have in our country, because this country is very driven by the visibility of individuals more than the substance behind. And that's why every time you hear there's a land scandal, people spend millions and billions, buying from this land buying company that's been set up. Or this guy who comes up overnight, that 1 year you've spoken about, puts up his pages on social media, Facebook, Twitter, wherever, and he's now the biggest exporter of labor to the Middle East. And people are paying him tens of thousands of Kenya shillings to do that. And so I think even Kenya, there's a huge cult personality thing where as long as you're visible, and there are many people who are visible like that, including in politics, but now when you look at the underneath, the iceberg underneath, there's really not much. So to go back to your question is, every business is different. And my view is that if you can be able to have an intersection between a very solid business, the iceberg, and also great visibility, then that would be the optimum situation.
But how is that possible? Because for you to have a solid business, it's a combination of fundamentals: capital, people, right? Processes. All that underneath costs money. So this saying of fake it until you make it is, let me be out there, at least I collect money, hoping that money is going to help me build my back office. So how do you balance it? Because as you said, how do I build my back office? Maybe it's interesting. Maybe Wanda can tell us, and maybe Jesse can tell us, at what point do you balance between making sure your product fit is perfect, such that customers, at what point is the inflection point where you know your product is good enough that customers are going to naturally propagate or be able to amplify the message, right? And it takes money. I think for you, how many millions of dollars have you put in your business? Significant to get to that scale, right? I'm sure also for your case. At what point do you think that inflection happens? And how did it happen in your businesses? Let's say one year.
I mean,
quality vis-a-vis expansion vis-a-vis.
In my world, I mean, clearly, there's very many different ways of doing this, but in my world, it is business first. It is the fundamentals of the business that have helped us raise. And we haven't raised that much. We actually have grown primarily through retained earnings. And word of mouth and, people liking the product. At the end of the day, and I'll be honest, like the last couple of years for me, I swung a little bit too much on the being out there, and whether it was in public or whether it was talking to potential investors and things like that. And I didn't focus. I focused less on the business, and we suffered as a result of it.
Suffered where? Revenue-wise or bleeding cash?
Both.
P&L?
Or not hugely, but in all aspects. And so I think there's benefits and there's costs to putting your personal brand out there. It takes time. It's not just about the loss of freedom. In my case, I haven't felt that loss of freedom as much because I don't have a different personality from who I am. I'm just, if I'm speaking as Wandia, so I don't have to remember, I'm now here representing this, or I should, I've tried to keep those, the who I am authentic in all situations. And I only divulge what I'm comfortable divulging. I don't say anything that my kids don't know or that I'd be embarrassed about if whatever. But you lose the freedom of time. It's time consuming. It's time consuming to be at events, to be speaking, to be interview. We've all given up half a day to be here today, and so for me, that time that was taken away from spending it with my leadership team, looking in detail at, we're still not solid enough that I can afford to be away 50% of the time. And so I think even those famous people you talk about in Nigeria and places, I think to a certain extent, the bigger your business becomes, then the personality, because now you're representing something that people know. I don't know that Tony or whatever was known before the bank became a bit of a brand. And I think what also happens, and this is the world of social media now, everybody has a podcast, everybody has an opportunity to tell a story, and so you're constantly being asked. And the more you're out there, the more people hear of you, the more you're asked. So it's like a snowball effect. And what I keep saying is, when people reach out, I get a request every week, at least, to come and speak somewhere. And I'm like, is there nobody else? Like, why do people keep coming to me? And a lot of people still shy away from. So
what do they come to? So you agree your brand, Vivo and you.
They come because they have seen it so much. So now I'm top of mind. So when people are thinking of which female entrepreneur, who and the more that, and if you, and the more coverage you get. And so for us, having President Ruto come to open the store we opened in Atlanta, huge. So now people are like, oh my God, Vivo must be whatever. Now we want you. So people like to be associated with whoever, if they consider you a winner, or if they think you're doing well, then you're the flavor. And those are the things that you have to be a little bit careful about, because things can change.
And that's interesting, and I would like you to go a bit. It's nice you're vulnerable on that conversation. there's an argument that say that when leadership of a country starts talking about your business, it most likely will collapse. Have you ever heard something like that?
Yeah.
Let's hope that's not true.
Yeah, let's hope that's not true.
If somebody mentions your business, then it's a problem at that leadership team, because all of a sudden everybody say, why, right? Anyway, you're representing Kenya. And I'll come to that Kenyan story later.
Okay. No,
No,
so
continue.
the question.
The question was, I liked you became vulnerable and talked about the fear. So for you, I feel like there's a fear, inherent fear, that your brand and you've said, you literally said, look, what I say in public is what I say. You'll find me. That's great. So, but then there's this inherent fear of any entrepreneur at some point. My brand and the company brand are so intertwined that you start wondering, okay, if anything happened to me, or how do I disconnect it from this brand? Okay, like now you say every day people are calling you to talk. Are they calling talk as Wandia, female entrepreneur? Are they calling talk to you because of Wandia, Vivo? Are they calling talk to you because of they want to come and speak as Wandia as an individual?
Yeah, this is. I mean, again, this is. I haven't really studied this, so it's not like I have data on it or whatever. But my feeling is people buy Vivo because they like the product.
100%.
People invite me because they associate now Wandia with a certain kind of profile and hype, and they think so. People will say, "I want you to come to speak at this event," and I'm like, "Really? I'm not sure that I'm the right person for that topic. Why don't you ask this one or that one?" They're like, "They're not going to bring the crowd you'll bring." You know. So there's now this association that if I'm there, I don't know if it's true or not, and I'm always like, "Are you sure?" Like I was surprised the other day. There was an event that was happening with a large Kenyan Indian community, and they wanted a few speakers for a panel, and she said, "We'd like you to be there." And I'm like, that's interesting, because that's not who our customer base typically is,
100%.
right? That's not who's buying from us. And they're like, "No, but they asked for you. They want Wandia because they've heard, this." And I was like, okay, interesting. I couldn't make it. The dates didn't work for me. So I think there are people who will want to come and listen to you, who want to take a photograph with you, who want to be tagged, or want to, be able to say I was here and I was at an event where so and so spoke. I don't know that always translates to will they buy your product. I think, to me, I see them as two quite separate. I'm sure there's overlap. And when I go to an event and I ask people how many here have ever bought from Vivo, half the room will put up their hand. But there are men who will want to come and speak because sometimes they think. The other thing is, the other risks that come with this is people assume you're doing far better than you might be doing. So they think you have a lot of money.
Yeah.
So now they want to borrow, they want you to invest, they expect you to be able to, buy their service even at a very high cost. Because there's this assumption that if you're known, it's because you're doing very well, and therefore you have a lot of resources. And that's a bit of a risk as well.
I'll come to that. Actually, that's an interesting conversation. I was going to touch on it and the risks. But Ian, I'm listening to you speak, and you speak so clearly and articulately. Do you get a lot of these speaking gigs? Do people call you, come and speak, come and speak, come and speak?
No, they don't. I do get.
And yet, I think you've got so much content.
I have. I mean, we have a respectable business.
Yeah.
We've been doing this for the last 22 years. We have a footprint in at least 18 African countries. We've trained organizations across North America, Europe, Middle East. So we have a pretty good footprint in terms of what we do. I still am very basic in terms of how I think a business should be built. And that's why I keep saying, we need to get the fundamentals right first. And my thought, to someone who's starting a business or founding a business is first get your ikigai, and which is, what are you happy to do? And then what is the world looking for, interested in terms of a need? And then is the world willing to buy that particular thing? And then finally, can you be good at it? So if you can get a confluence of those four requirements in your business, and then go and create fundamentals around it. So in our case, for us, or for me, the main thing I needed to build right from the get-go was trust. I needed our business to be trusted. And when you look at what trust is, which is basically confidence both of character and competence, we needed to get the kind of character that was, around the right values, the right ethos in our business. And that was fundamental. And we also needed to have the competence, because you can have good character, but if you cannot deliver to the promise, if technically you're not able to deliver, but you're a good person, then you're actually useless to your client. And vice versa. You might be extremely competent, as we've seen some companies, but they have their own values, they have their own character. And so that was a major thing in terms of us trying to get the trust built. The other building block for trust was getting the right talent, employees who are engaged, very engaged in terms of what we did. They believed in what we did, and so that our company had a future for them. We also needed to get the right processes in place for us to be able to deliver to the trust that we're looking to, and finally the content. So once we put all these things together, we've got an amazing amount of trust from our clients. I can tell you that 85% of our business is repeat or referral. And that works pretty good. We have clients who we've had for 16 years.
But remember, you're in a knowledge business. So branding a knowledge business is very different from branding,
which is
a retail business.
Which is true as well. And that's why I said when we're talking about visibility, I talked about personality and whether your business is a B2B or a B2C. So in B2B space, it's a little different. Like Jesse said, people really don't have to know that you're the founder for them to be able to consume the service. As long as if someone refers, just like you're saying, if one big brand refers another big brand, to us, you always find that it works like magic. So, this bank will come and say, we've worked with this organization and, we trained 500 people with them and it was amazing. Their service, the business outcomes we wanted worked like magic. That's how we built our business. Now, if visibility comes as a result of that, that would be amazing. And so, but for me, I've always believed in that.
Do you put yourself out there on like LinkedIn as you or as your brand?
Our biggest LinkedIn followers are as a brand.
Your company, not you.
Yes. That's why we have the biggest followers. And they're mainly corporates or people in the corporate business.
So let's assume you're how many years? 22?
22.
So so definitely going to have a succession planning, unless you want to sell a business. Let's assume you hire a CEO who is red. You hire me. Okay?
You're fiery red.
Me, very red. Kabisa. Me, if I came to your business, from day one, I would push my brand to push your brand.
Which is
so now you hire a CEO who is red, okay, and decides they're going to push their business through their brand. How would that work out?
I think it would be fantastic because we already have the fundamentals right.
Okay.
So that for me is very critical.
It depends. It would depend though on who that person is, because if they're slightly controversial, or it could be a risk. It
could also be a risk as well. But if the noise and the visibility is around the brand, and you're telling people come in here and experience the brand, and this is what the brand can do for you. So if it's within the trustworthy, I wouldn't hire you if you're not trustworthy. Okay, but if you fitted the trustworthy brand, and you are fiery red and you're out there every day, then that would be an asset. And if people came in droves, they would actually find a very solid foundation for the organization.
Is that your typical next step of growth?
So this is a big question and maybe a vulnerability situation as well.
100%.
I feel that we are not yet ready for succession, even though we should at this time in our lives. I think that's the biggest question in my business. What next? And what next? We're talking about breakfast. I told you our kids are not interested in taking over. I think the other dilemma we have is, over time, you find that the majority of people that are working for you are fairly new, young in the business, and would probably not be part of immediately right now of the succession process where you're looking at, take over the business, own it, and things like those. So that's something that fundamentally is a gap and is a challenge. And so the next thing would be sell the business. And again, those are things that would need to look at, how would that look like? I'm still interested in legacy. And so many of the friends I know who have allowed funds to come in and invest in those funds, unfortunately, the ones I know, the business kind of didn't go the way it should after 5 years or 10 years, because the fund was looking at something very different, not necessarily legacy. We're very interested in a legacy. So that conversation then about selling and all that is a bigger conversation than just the money. So we're in a dilemma. We're in a dilemma where we're saying, what next for the business and how best do we go about it? And we're at a stage in our lives. I'm at a stage in my life where after 22 years, I have to be thinking, where should this business go?
Wow, nice to be vulnerable, and you maybe the solution will come. Jesse, how many times you get called to speak? I see you on Financial Times. I see you in London speaking. Sometimes I say, I know Jesse here. For you, when you find yourself being called to these gigs, do they call you as Jesse Moore, the founder who figured out this journey, or they call you as Jesse Moore, the M-KOPA CEO?
Before we answer that question, I would be remiss, given 85% of Ian's business comes from referrals, if I did not state to the large listening audience of Founders Battlefield that we are a very happy customer of Ian's services, and so I would refer everyone to the wonderful services provided by the gentleman to my right.
Yeah.
To your question on if I'm speaking, it's not very often. Yes, I've been to some of those conferences you mentioned before, but I don't do it a ton. And I'm trying to connect it to what, Wanda, you were saying about getting into becoming popular in a speaking circuit. And it has tons of advantages, and it can help the company, but it can also distract you from other parts of the job and what needs doing. And it's a careful balance. So for me, I think I would think of the opportunities to speak as being opportunities to support those 4 different segments of our branding, if you will. Like branding towards customers, branding towards investors, towards staff, and towards the broader set of partners, ecosystem, whatever. And in our case, I've always tilted to the customer priority first. Getting the product fit right. You asked a question a couple minutes ago. Some here, like, when do you know you've done enough of that and the product's working and you can sort of start to step back? It's always been my bias to make sure we're sort of not neglecting, because if the customer experience goes bad, you're really in trouble. The business won't last for much longer. In our business case, we actually depend economically on millions of people waking up every day and deciding to send us 50 shillings, which they basically don't have to do if they don't want to. Can you imagine, right? Like today we could get up, and if everybody in our customer base just decided the M-KOPA value proposition isn't any good anymore, I mean, it could be game over in like a week. So to me, nothing matters more than making sure the customer experience is good. And I'd probably say historically 90% of the focus of my time and effort has to be on that. And that is not a problem that me speaking on stage helps solve at all, right? That's much more about product and pricing and distribution and all the mechanics of building the business. When I go, for example, speak at an FT conference, what's that about? Well, that's really capital markets, right? We've raised hundreds of millions of dollars. It's a very capital intensive business that we run. So to go tap into the hundreds of millions of dollars means to have to go to London once in a while and be on stage where there's lots of banks and, you know, private equity and all those crowds. And so, you know, spending a bit of time doing that to be on their radar, I think more as the company than as the founder, I would say, but you can ask them. It's about sort of saying, okay, well, if that's 10% of what matters this year, right? If 80% of what matters this year is customer experience and maybe 10% is staff recruiting the next wave of talent or keeping the right wave of talent, and then the last 10 is raising some capital, then to me it's about making sure I can spend the proportional amount of time and energy on that and not get too carried away with more and more talks to capital market providers when like that can only be 10% of the problem, because otherwise I'll take my eye off the other thing that matters. That changes over time. And in our case as a company, I think I can spend more time now on the capital market side because the product and the proposition are 15 years proven and scaling, and you know we have brilliant people that do that better than anybody's ever done it before. So, you know, it changes. It changes. But I guess the thing I'm thinking here is the importance of being purposeful about what you're trying to achieve through utilizing your time and your own brand towards the aims of the business. And if that's, again, like back in the day for M-KOPA, if Bob Cullimore called and he said, Jesse, I want you at this event, I'd be like, how high do I have to jump to get, you know, yes, I'll be there, because Safaricom was such an intrinsic partnership, right? And nowadays that, anyway, these things evolve. And the importance is trying to be strategic about how you use your own brand and your time as a founder and CEO, I guess.
Interesting. As you said, and I think your business is in Lagos, right? And other markets. Ian, you've mentioned your business, you're doing business with different other customers that are not Kenyan. Vivo, naturally, you've gone to the US. So let's now come back to country branding and your business. I don't know, I'm trying to figure out how many companies I know that say proudly Kenyan and take the product to Nigeria and say proudly Kenyan in Nigeria. I see a lot of drive by South African companies that say proudly South African. Even they put the South African logo on the product, right? Let's come back to you guys. Do you brand your products as proudly Kenyan?
So,
And if it's a yes or a no, let's understand why the dynamics of why we're not branding our companies as proudly Kenyan.
yeah.
Kenyan as a brand, is Kenya a good brand to have? Sorry, it's a controversial question, but I think...
And it's a very good question. So one of the expressions of this answer, in our case, we now finance a lot of smartphones. And a couple of years ago, we decided to localize the manufacturing here to Nairobi. And we run the largest smartphone factory on the continent, 400 employees making millions of phones a year, ISO 9000 certified. It's an amazing part of our business. Really proud of it. When we go to our customers with these smartphones that are made here in Nairobi, and we ask them in like marketing consultations, is it a plus or a negative if we say this phone is made in Kenya? We get very mixed views, honestly, from customers. I think it's trending in the right way, which is to say, I think it's trending to, heck yes, I would like to buy a smartphone made in Kenya.
Who says that?
Our customers.
Really?
Yeah. I remember myself, I was in Eldoret 3 years ago when we were just starting manufacturing, and I had phones in my hands, and I said to the customers in Eldoret, or actually it was our salespeople, right? We run an agency force. So I was talking to the agents. I was like, this phone's made in Nairobi. And one guy was like, oh, that's great. I'm going to tell my customers this phone's made in Nairobi. We can, be proud of the fact that this is made in Kenya. We can be proud of the job creation, et cetera, et cetera. And then there was another lady, and she was like, I am not going to tell my customers this is made in Kenya. And we said, why? She said, they'll be concerned about the quality. There's something about getting something from overseas and something about technology coming from China or wherever, So very divergent views. Now, I think it's shifting. And again, I think shifting in a positive way. If you go to the factory, you'll see a lot of pride about this product is made in Kenya. And I think it's really a source of pride also for the team that works there, right? The 400 people in the factory. But it's interesting how when we go to the market, there's mixed views on whether a product that's made in Kenya is a positive or a negative. But it's a bit of a self-reinforcing or snowball effect. The more people get the product, the more it works, the more it stands up to time and quality. People start to realize it's made in Kenya, they tell their friends. And now you can change that narrative of, oh, it's not good quality if it's made locally, right? So that's what I mean. It's changing positively for our products, yes, but I think for probably a lot of products in Kenya. And then on the back of that confidence, on the back of that demand, there's more opportunity to say this with pride, right?
Interesting. So when you go to Nigeria, do you say proudly Kenyan?
No.
Why?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't say that M-KOPA is a Kenyan business. It was started in Kenya, but it's a Pan-African business. Yeah.
Okay.
So we when we communicate our company, it's a Pan-African fintech. Started in Kenya. Yeah, this is our home. But it's not a Kenyan product for Kenyan customers. It's a Pan-African. And in this year so far, more of our new customers in 2025 have come outside Kenya than inside Kenya. So it's true, right? We are a Pan-African business. When we go to Nigeria, we don't say we're a Nigerian business, nor do we say we're a Kenyan business. We say we're this Pan-African business with a product proposition that serves the needs of an everyday earner in Shomolu, in Lagos, just as well as it does an everyday earner in Mathare, right? So that's the proposition. Then people look into it, well, where did the company start? And we can say, oh, well, it started in Kenya. Well, why did it start in Kenya? Well, because the product and the proposition rely on mobile payments. And mobile payments in Africa were born with M-PESA in Kenya, right? And similarly, you might say that about M-PESA. I mean, M-PESA hasn't, as a brand or as an actual platform, the M-PESA platform has worked a little bit in some other markets, maybe not as big as we would have hoped originally. And you've got alternatives like MTN Momo and Airtel Money, et cetera, in other markets. But nobody would question the story, the true story that mobile payments on the continent came from Nairobi, right? It came from Kenya, came from M-PESA, and has now propagated as a similar service in other markets under different colors and different names. But yeah, that's the answer. In our case, we are a Pan-African business. We always had that intention. In fact, we were operating in multiple markets from 12 years ago, right? So it wasn't very long that this was only a Kenyan business. We started in one market here, but very quickly moved into multiple markets. And today, the majority of our customers are coming from outside of Kenya.
So what happens when Pakistan want your product? You're going to say you're Pan?
We're going to what?
When you go to Pakistan, assume
Right.
Pakistan want your products.
Yeah.
How are you going to sell your product in Pakistan? Assume there's a demand.
Good question.
Are you
Yeah.
going to say you're Pan-African in Pakistan? You're going to say you're global?
Yeah, and we have that aspiration, okay? So it's not on our current roadmap that we will be outside of Africa, just because there's so many other markets closer to home that we want to reach first,
Okay.
right? That is to say that the aspiration in the long term is that M-KOPA is a global proposition, yeah? Pakistan's a good potential market for us. In fact, we've had guys from, I thought you knew the story, that's what you were saying, but we've had guys.
Yeah, I've been listening to you. I'm figuring out, if I was in your business, which markets I would be going outside Africa.
Yeah.
Already Pakistan, my mind came top.
So we literally had some guys from Pakistan almost show up at our door. They're like, we flew here from Karachi, I think it was, because we heard about this proposition and we want it in our market. What do we have to do to get the license, or how would this work? And it's not just been from Pakistan, but other Asian markets, and there's lots of phone calls from all around the world. Our answer to that is, we're so glad you're interested. Give us some time. Again, we're trying to build the business brick by brick, market by market. We've got 5. We'll add a 6th. We'll add a 7th. But I think sooner than longer, is that a way to say it? Nearer term than longer term. Yes, the aspirations for what we do are pan-continental and global. Because for me and for M-KOPA, the proposition has been, as I said at the beginning of my introduction, we're here to finance progress for everyday earners. I didn't say Kenyan everyday earners in that equation.
They can also be global.
The mission is to finance progress for everyday earners, wherever they are, right? That's the proper extension of that. The everyday earners we were able to first serve, the first million customers, the first million everyday earners, were in Kenya. Why were they in Kenya? Because of M-PESA, right? Because we had the technology rails we needed to exist. But then when MTN mobile money starts to take off in Ghana, we can go serve Ghanaians as well, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's always been a global proposition,
Yeah.
focused on a user called an everyday earner. And whether the everyday earner is Kenyan, Zimbabwean who lives in South Africa, or a Pakistani lady in Islamabad, those are the customers we want to serve, all of them, eventually.
Great point. I think as we near in our 2 hour, I think it's like interesting conversation around country branding, okay? And because think about Apple. If you know it's an American company, despite it being manufactured in China, wherever, it is constantly remained as an American company.
Cupertino, California.
Yeah, everybody knows that, right? And where I want to go with this is to figure out why we've not been able, apart from our tea and coffee, okay, what do we carry? What products have we packaged as a Kenyan product to take globally? Does Kenya as a brand work for you or against you? And if it works against you, because as many people listen to this, they're not necessarily founders, people who are in policy positions who ask themselves, maybe I think we're the problem. Maybe you think, why aren't people not proud to say proudly Kenyan? Maybe our behavior, how we behave globally or locally, as maybe politicians, maybe people start saying, no, don't touch a Kenyan product, right? So we'll come back to that, right? But for 1 year now you're in America, how have you packaged the product?
So first of all, I think fashion is interesting because we mostly wear clothing made outside of the continent. I'd say 95+%, whether it came in secondhand or new. And none of that was designed for an African consumer. And yet Africans have not the typical body shapes and sizes of what you would find in Europe or in Asia and whatever. So there's a need for a product that isn't necessarily available. And so there's the part of the story which is where it was made, but there's also the part of who is it made for. And I think the reason that we even had the confidence to try and explore the US market is because we were invited to showcase and sell at a very large music festival that's held every year called the Essence Festival, that's primarily attended by African American women. And they had never heard of Vivo. So there was no Wandia story, there was no Vivo story. We just had a very attractive booth there. But they came and they touched and they felt and they tried on the product and they were like, wow, this works, this fits, this feels good. I wear it, I look in the mirror and I'm just happy with the way that it works. So I think part of the story and the positioning is we have designed with you in mind. But the where does it come from? We have been talking about made in Kenya, but in the long run, for me, I think the made in Africa is the more powerful story. I don't know that narrowing it just to Kenya, and I like to think of Bata. For me, Bata's, it's an old brand, it's been there forever, but everywhere you go, people think Bata comes from there. You go to India, Indians think Bata is an Indian brand. You go to Mauritius, they think it's a Mauritian brand. Kenyans think Bata is Kenyan.
It's not.
It's not. It's a Canadian owned by Czechoslovakian or wherever the original founder came from. And what I'd love is, even for M-KOPA, as much as now you have a factory here making it, maybe there should be a number of different factories across Africa. So, you just see Africa, and that's more of a personal ambition because I think we need the jobs. Africa needs jobs more than almost anywhere else in the world because we're more and more people are coming into the job market and not finding opportunity. And so if we if they're labor-intensive sectors, we should be bringing that manufacturing here. But I think for most consumers, I'm not sure that that really matters. I mean, people are buying something because they like the association, they like the way the product works, they like the price point. Yeah, maybe the fact that it's made in Kenya. I mean, everything that Vivo sells is made in Kenya. Everything. But I would say most people still don't know that.
Yeah.
They still seem surprised, even though we've been talking about it for over 10 years. So does the Kenya brand, I think in certain countries, and again, that's why you've got to be a bit careful, because today in Tanzania, that might be a bad thing. A year, 2 years ago, it might not have been so bad, and 5 years ago, it was bad. So the politics of all of these things. So I think if you associate too much, but I think as a continent, maybe it waters it down a little bit. So you're not now being affected by the politics of today, or whether President Kagame is speaking to Museveni, or, we shouldn't allow our brands to be too vulnerable to day-to-day changes. Okay. And I think one of the things, I think globally, if you say, does the Africa brand, I think the problem is we've allowed the story of Africa to be told by others. And so if you're trying to take an African brand to the rest of the world and say this is from Africa, people are like, Africa? Isn't Africa where it's just poor people and everyone's struggling?
How can you build stuff?
But I think the more that we tell our own stories, and I think more recently, where I have seen this done brilliantly and where Africa is now, top of the game is in music with Afrobeats. I mean, there is nowhere in the world you will go today and not hear Afrobeats being played. They might not even necessarily know who the singer is or where it's from, but it's a sound that everyone is jumping on. And, for us, when, we actually have since closed the store in Atlanta, we're still online. But one of the things that we made sure was that there was always Afrobeats music playing. And people would walk in off the street because they're being pulled by the music. And then they come in, and so the story of Africa is starting to change.
Wow, amazing, interesting. Ian, for you, how, in this context of made in Kenya, or we are a Kenyan company, how does that play out for you?
Yeah, for me, it's a little different because it's a knowledge business. When we started off, we quickly thought that it was important to be in more markets than Kenya. And so we had, physical offices in Uganda, in Rwanda, in Burundi, and we're just about to go to Ethiopia. But I think 8 or 9 years of operating in those 4 markets, we discovered a few truths. And, one of the truths was that the talent assets in those countries other than Kenya were very different. And so we found that it was very, very difficult to have the level of talent that we needed in those markets. And so whereas we had the operational work mainly done by people in those markets, whenever we needed to deliver, solutions to like executives in those countries, we always needed to ship people, from Kenya. So more often than not, the delivery consultants, we could only get the quality we wanted from Kenya. And so we were having a lot of cross-border movement in terms of talent. And so eventually we discovered that we can actually do business by having everything headquartered in Nairobi. And that was because, in any case, we found that the majority of the largest companies are actually headquartered in Nairobi, and they have subsidiaries or branches across East Africa and the rest of Africa. And that's how we operate. So we closed our offices, the physical offices in those countries, but we still have pretty good business, going on in those countries, plus the other African countries where, the main business is in Kenya, basically, taking us to Nigeria. For example, we have an audit firm, one of the big 4 audit firms, and we train their people across 15 countries. We look at, one of the big mobile phone companies where we would train their people in 10 countries. And so for us, now coming back to the Kenyan question, what we found is that there's an expectation that because you're coming from Kenya, there's a certain quality that you're bringing. We might not think like that, but I know that even when I speak to CEOs of other countries in Africa and I give them the opportunity for their people to be trained by the local staff, because we do have facilities where we can actually have their local staff do the training, they'll be like, no, we want you to come, not me in particular, but your staff to come. There's a certain quality we are looking for, there's certain boldness that we are looking for in terms of the delivery. And that's when you start realizing that there's actually, contrary to what we think, that Kenyans are very highly regarded professionally outside this country. Now, is it always the case? In Kenya, it's a microcosm of all sorts of talent. I've met really mediocre talent, but also met like really fine talent in this country. And this is something that is appreciated across Africa, but even, we've done amazing sessions for people in the States. And they come back and say, wow, we had a bit of misgivings when we had your company is based in Kenya. And we did the delivery by, consultants who are Kenyan. And so I think it's just tying that up, saying Kenya has some amazing talent, and it's possible for us to leverage on that across the global stage.
I think on this whole question, what's important is that when the product is good, when the product's quality, and it's made in Kenya or it's delivered by a team from Kenya, that needs to be followed with the acknowledgement or the celebration that's where it comes from, right? If it's Vivo clothes in Atlanta and then they're just fitting well, they're stylish, people like them, and they're really good quality, then when you can offer, and by the way, this is made in Kenya, right? You start to build this momentum. And it's the same with us in these smartphones. People have the expectation that their smartphone comes from China or the United States or wherever they expect. But when you get a good product in your hands and it's working, and then you can say, oh, by the way, this is made in Kenya, you can start to build this positive momentum. People are waiting for it, no doubt, in my mind. People want those successes, and we have to take the opportunities when you have great training, great clothing, great smartphones that are being delivered or built or curated from this market to start to build that.
But it should never compensate. Or you should never expect it to compensate for poor quality or, an unfair price. I mean, I always say, that it's a bonus, but that is not. We shouldn't imagine that is why anyone will buy from us. We should be able to stand next to product from anywhere else in the world and compete head on head. Yeah. For the within your sort of category or price margin.
As you guys are speaking, several government officials that have led the ICT ministry in the last 15 years, I have always tried to have conversation with them from this point of view. First, I think we branded, I'm talking from a technology point of view, knowledge point of view. We branded the Silicon Savannah. I think it's a great brand. Sawa. And I thought the last 15 years we would have been able to capitalize on our brand of the Silicon Savannah better. So apart from M-PESA, really, you cannot connect Kenya to any other technology innovation, which is rather sad. Now let's connect the dots, and I think that's why we sort of failed, because as a country, from a technology export point of view, and saying proudly Kenyan, because there are certain problems that are solved by technology solutions that solve African problems, in Kenya, for instance. I look at health. When we started doing health, just we talked about this. If, for instance, you tell a CS constantly, if we solve this problem as a Kenyan company, a 7Cs, you will export this solution pan-African because we'll have solved a typical structure of how to deliver healthcare using technology in a third world country where your rural hospitals, it's a totally different setup to a European solution, correct? Now, then I turn around and look at, we've bought a 1.8 billion shilling solution for healthcare. The next thing you hear, 65% of that solution is coming from Middle East. Then you ask yourself, okay, how will the guy in Middle East know how to solve African solutions? So basically in our technology, what has happened, Eastern European countries, people like Estonia, some of these stuff, they've sorted their problems internally by using their own technology, IP. Then they leverage economic diplomacy, in this government to government, to come to our markets, basically to re-engineer their technology products to us. And we are very good as Kenyans to say, come, let's do it, let's re-engineer. So what tends to happen, a company from Croatia or from Israel or whatever will come to Kenya, re-engineer with our solutions, retool, the product is version 1.5, European, come to Kenya and it becomes version 2.4, African, and then leapfrog from Kenya to Zambia to Nigeria, which is really, really sad, to be honest, from my point of view, from a technology point of view. We have a great opportunity to actually leverage the Silicon Savannah by saying we are consuming our own products, and our products, we can export our products. So when I look at, for instance, eCitizen, my hope is that when I see eCitizen having been the platform that is integrating a lot of our citizen services, I hope to go to Nigeria one day and see eCitizen in Nigeria. And we are proudly saying that is a Kenyan product because it solved a big Kenyan problem, right? Now, from our point of view, I look at countries like Israel, right? Now we are talking about country context because as we move into brand, right? We started with founder brand. We moved into organizational brand. Now let's move to country brand. What has Israel done very well? Israel, a lot of products you don't even realize, like security products, come from Israel in many countries. So Israel, in a way, has figured out how do we monetize, how do we make sure that any security product in IT that's been sold is an Israeli product to a large extent across the world. It is a very small country, exporting globally. So if you look at Israel in terms of export, the amount of value people value Israeli product from a security point of view is significant, right? So my thoughts are going around, what does it take the next generation, our children, the people following us, to think that Kenya could be at a global level in terms of branded products from Kenya, beyond tea and coffee? What are the sectors you feel can leverage Kenya from a Kenyan brand, apart from tea and coffee? I think technology is one. Which other industry? I think what Vivo is doing, to be honest, can become a Pan-African, can become a global platform, 100%. Because you're saying we are building for African bodies, African feet, and we are targeting. So I think you can do it. I think what M-KOPA is doing, you can do it. So long as any market adopts micro payments or what you call mobile payments, you can overnight become, and Safaricom I think gives you that, M-Pesa, as a bedrock already. Everyone knows of M-Pesa, case studies, whatever. Which other industries do you think because I'm thinking, how will Kenya be on the global scale? Right?
I think it's every industry. I think the challenge we have in Kenya, and we can't discuss this in 5 hours, is just the setup. So if you look at the whole setup, economic setup, it needs to be re-engineered to be able to allow entrepreneurship, founding, to be encouraged. Now, the moment you make it really hard from a macro and a micro point of view for people to found businesses and to run with them and to profit from them and to be motivated to found another, then it becomes very, very hard for us to be able to start having real homegrown businesses. And so right from, the tax regime to the licensing regimes to all those things that make it so difficult, for business to operate, we need to look at them and say, how do we become a Delaware of business? How do we become a Mauritius of business? And if you look at, some of those territories where people want to go and, do work and create, some policy guys have sat down and said, how do we have, forward and backward integration of in our country of the different, industries. So I think that's a very big thing. We couldn't speak about this. Everyone who comes here talks about those macro issues, which tend to be political to an extent, but they come down to the kind of economic policies that this country has for its people. You cannot fight, the challenges of policy in your country, and then also fight global issues such as exchange rates, the war in Ukraine and in Israel and all those kind of things. So already there's a huge challenge in the economic stage, but closer home, I think we can have things, an environment that is encouraging for business. In my own business, I find that getting, for example, compliance. I get 10 notices in a year, for compliance. Yet we believe we're one of the most compliant businesses. The time it takes us to hang around, with someone from the Revenue Authority, work with them for 2 or 3 months, and then they disappear when they figure out there isn't anything for them to, take away from you. It's time we could be using to create, okay? Or just having this environment where, it's easier for banks to lend government than to lend to an entrepreneur, because it's so much risk-free to take your money into bonds than give Razor Resource Group, 100 million shillings or 50 million shillings. So there's a whole structure in our economy that can encourage every industry, whether it's fashion or tech or learning or financial. That's my view about that.
Interesting. I'm just, as you're speaking, you talked about macroeconomics, internal. When I look at South Africa, when I go to South Africa, I realize when you go to most of the shops, there are Woolworths. All that stuff is manufactured in South Africa, right? Or where does it come from?
Used to be. Now the unions are became too strong and too expensive.
So where are they manufacturing? China?
Yes.
China?
A lot of it China, some of it in Mauritius.
But South Africa, for a large extent, now because the market is open, for a large extent, South Africa maybe being closed because of apartheid forced them to become innovative and consume their own products, right? So on a typical table, if you think about a typical table, if you go and have, if you're having dinner in Kenya today and you look at the components there, the spice, the fork, the spoon, the cutlery.
The toothpick.
Who owns those brands? Are they Kenyan brands?
No.
But if I go to South Africa, 90% of that stuff will be from that market. So what do you think, where do you think we failed, Jesse? Where do you think we could improve?
Well, I think about your question a minute ago, like what are the opportunities where Kenya could create a global play? First comment is that, yes, Israel is now well known. I mean, maybe not well known, but is dominating security and software and tech. And the US has Silicon Valley has traditionally dominated a lot of technology. We got to acknowledge that both of those very successful private industries were born on the back of a ton of government
100%
spending, military spending, right? ARPANET became the internet. Silicon was all being paid for by the US government. So the catalyst in these cases is important, that billions and billions probably of dollars in each case is going into some sort of government application, government spend, and then you get the technology going and boom, boom, boom. And we don't have that, right? We don't have the same spending by government, nor do I think it's realistic to think the government can spend tons of money creating industry.
They do, but only that they give it to other people.
Fine. Anyway, but my point is some of these industries are not just sort of
organic.
Yeah, they come because there's circumstances, there's a lot of military spending, and then they can spin from there, which is fine. So what are these unique attributes? Like what does Kenya have that others don't, that could become product categories that are sort of globally competitive and dominant? I'm going to list two. They may sound wacky, but one is geothermal energy. I'm not no expert in geothermal energy, but from what I understand, Kenya has a lot of it and is already tapping into it. And it's not just, we've got steam under the ground that we can harvest, but it's like, how do you put that into really neat applications like AI data centers that are green because they're running off geothermal, right? We know that there's this huge push for data centers and energy, and the problem with AI and all this compute is it's just going to be sucking up so much energy, and people are worried about the climate. Well, what a brilliant opportunity to tap into renewable energy that's sitting under the ground and power the future of the internet. So that, to me, feels like a big area of opportunity. And I know there's lots of projects in development in that space. But again, it's truly a Kenyan opportunity because in Nigeria, they don't have geothermal, right? So play to the strengths and the natural resources. And this country does have a lot of great renewable resources, particularly when it comes to geothermal. The second, I was thinking more kind of inspired by Wandia, and talking about like culture and you're talking about Afrobeats and whatever, but what is a culture and an industry, albeit maybe a small industry, but probably not as small as we think, where I automatically think Kenya is the best at this in the whole world? Running culture. Kenya's got the best runners. Everybody would agree with that in the world, right? Why does Kenya not have yet global brands of running shoes and apparel and fitness applications and wellness that can build around Eliud Kipchoge and Faith and all these incredible runners? Like, that is something that this country has on a global level as a brand identity, and it's true. It's driven by having the fastest long distance runners on the planet. It would seem to me like something that is ripe for the taking. And okay, maybe the running apparel industry globally isn't as big as the security defense spending, but it's still proper. It's a proper industry where I think you could create that. So very different ideas, but coming from an idea, a beginning of what is something that Kenya's already got natural capability in. One's on the human side, one's on the, on the geographic side, but investing then considerably in those. And I guess the role of government is to put investment there, create the policies, as you say, to create businesses there, create the export licenses. But, it's kind of crazy that there isn't a shoe company. And I know there was Enda for a while. I think it's still going. There's some other efforts. But like, why isn't the best running shoe in the world a Kenyan running shoe? Because everybody in Germany and Japan and Argentina would buy it. If you could be like, these are the shoes that Kipchoge ran in to, break the 2-hour marathon, but he was running in Nikes. So that's something that I think we could take on.
Ian, any pointers to, and as you see, I've just thought about something. When I go to Turkey, when you go to Istanbul and you just sit around there, you look at, you just think how Turkey has evolved as a country, that you even listen that African governments are now buying Turkish technology in military, from drones to cars. Then I asked myself, like, so what did Turkey do to build this industry? Like, what did it take, right? So within our lifetime, I think we'll be here for a few years, more years. Do you think we're going to get there? Do you think we're going to get to that point when you just know Kenya is going to make that tipping point to rethink value creation and wealth creation, to move ourselves to Turkey, where we are so proud, apart from tea and coffee, right? We are saying, wow, this technology was built in Kenya, this was built here, this was done here. What do you think it will take? Will we ever get there, or the market will have changed? We'll have lost the opportunity.
I'm very Kenya optimistic, and Africa as well, very optimistic about who we are, what we can do. One of the things we say is that culture is a collective behavior of culture is a collective behavior of leaders. Okay, so what leaders value is what the people who are being led value too. And so, if you look at our country, for example, I brought in a lot of foreigners, coming in here for one assignment or the other. And the one thing they keep saying is, your country seems like an aeroplane on a runway that's been taxiing forever. and it needs to take off. This aeroplane that's been taxiing for the longest time looks like it's ready to take off, but for some reason, doesn't take off. And so for me, the most important asset our country has is talent. As a matter of fact, the most important asset for an organization is its talent pool. And Kenya has amazing talent. So there's a lack of congruence between this country that has amazing talent and then a lot of mediocrity we see in terms of products made here, services from here. So then we need to figure out, what's the common denominator? And so I go back to culture is leader-led. Okay? What leaders value, the people who are led are also valuing that. So for me, where we're going to break the chain is at the level of leadership, period.
Wow.
It's as easy as far as I'm concerned.
One day, as you guys, I was just thinking, the other day my friend was in Egypt. And she told me, I'm going to the market. So I told her, by the way, I really love great bed sheets. Can you get me some Egyptian cotton, 1,000 thread sheets? And then I just asked myself, bloody hell, Egyptian 1,000 thread? Why did that happen? How did that even happen? How did that happen? Where did that come together, right? So how did Egyptians figure out that they're going to brand? You go to American stores, you see Egyptian 1,000 thread count bed sheets. And I think, Egyptian, why? What? So at what point do you think Kenya is going to get there? You are leading the world with Vivo. When I was growing up, I remember there was Raymond.
The suits.
What happened? Are we going backwards? Because sometimes I think earlier in our lives, we had brands that had already begun transcending our boundaries. Correct? Then what happened?
So I mean, these are big questions, and I mean, I'm listening to the whole conversation and wondering, and I am so narrowly focused in the world.
Don't worry,
in the world of fashion. But having said that, I mean, as much as I agree with you that one of our biggest assets is our people, we also know the world is changing. And, talent and the way we think about talent now and what it will look like in 10, 20 years with AI and everything else, that's going to change as well. And so I think we still have to come back to what are some of those other things that we are uniquely placed for, like what you said about the geothermal or what we're known for, whether we understand why it is that we have the best runners. I don't know. I mean, I was interested, for example, last year I went to India to attend a conference and traveled with a number of people from Kenya, including a lot of Kenyan Indians. And they were all taking chevra from Kenya to India. And I was like, isn't chevra an Indian snack? And they're like, but the chevra from Kenya is so much better. And I was like, but why? And they're like, there's something in our potatoes. And the way Kenyan potatoes translate into chevra that Indians are asking from the Indians traveling from here to bring them chevra from Kenya. So I'm like, well, why aren't we packaging that globally and selling it? And I think there are probably many things, not just tea and coffee. And by the way, even that tea and coffee that we think we're so good at, how often is that branded as Kenyan tea when it's sold out there? It isn't. So, and I come back to almost where we started, the power of brands and the power of branding. And I think if you want to be known as we make the best cotton in the world, then that has to be a national effort. And something that government, but also private sector and everyone gets behind and says, when we are out there speaking, everyone should reinforce the fact that our, Kenyan chevra is the best in the world, or whatever that's going to be. But I also think, and I mean, maybe this is not taking Kenyan products out to the world, but Kenya as a place to come to is one of the richest experiences. I mean, how many countries can you go to? And I mean, I have Italians staying at my house right now, and you know, the fact that they could wake up and in 20 minutes be in a national park. I mean, I don't think we talk about this stuff enough, and we don't make it easy enough. And as the world is changing and people, you know, those who have money and probably don't need to work as hard, we're going to be seeing tourism, wellness. You know, can we become a destination where people are coming for that sort of experience? You know, the whole wellness, fitness, health. I mean, a lot of our national, I mean, the things we grow, the herbs, the spices, the moringa, you know, all of these things.
Totally.
More and more people are interested in longevity, in health, in wellness. I don't think we figured out where is Kenya going to play in that space, but I think there is huge opportunity, and I don't know that we can wait for government. I think government is very short-term thinking, one election cycle to the next, and these things need longer, you know. So the private sector, we need to get together and sort of align.
Mike, you might know this because of Ponea, but where's Kenya on medical tourism? Connecting everything you just said, like this is an amazing country to visit, got great hospitality, got great wellness, and has rising capabilities in healthcare, like really talented healthcare workers, doctors.
And we
nurses.
are a place that people visit. I mean, especially in the region.
But
you know, if
But this could be like, you know, like Thailand had become, I don't know if it still is, a medical tourism
yeah,
place.
medical tourism.
I'll
people
give
Kenya,
you-
medical tourism seems like
Agreed.
a natural one.
I'll give you why. Maybe my 2 cents. One time I went to see a doctor and they told me, "Oh, Mike, your hip, there was something with my hip." So what I did, it was a Friday. You'd go to an MRI, so a doctor, blah blah blah. Then I said, "Let me check. Let me go online and check what's up." And contacted several hospitals because my doctor told me we need to do a procedure. Okay. So I said, "What?" Okay. So I decided, let me go online and do a little bit more investigation. So I went to South Africa sites. I went to talk to a hospital in South Africa, contacted them. I went to India. I went to Israel. I went to London. The only country, this was Friday. By Saturday and Sunday, I had 5 teleconsults with Indian hospitals. No South African hospital even bothered to contact. No Israeli hospital bothered to contact me back. No America, nothing. 5 Indian hospitals.
aggressive.
Yeah. Teleconsult. Imagine you go to their website, you find a WhatsApp link, they have already contacted you. There's a menu. Say, when do you want to consult? What time? Their PA reminds you and tells you, we have a call at 2:00 to do a teleconsult. So it got me thinking like, those guys have understood what we call patient-centric care. Our healthcare is not patient-centric. It's very simple. Come, queue, hang around. Then we'll take care of you. So you cannot be a healthcare destination when you operate that way. So you remember, being a tourist, what happens? You go online, you book. Don't you book? You book. You look. You can. Me and you can book right now to go to Miami. We'll know the hotel. We'll know the flight. We'll know who will pick us up. We know that. We even know what to expect, right? India's done that in healthcare. Try and go to a hospital's website today. It is blah, 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 blah. You don't even know what they're saying. Then there's like a small page there that says inquiry, which is like a form. That form, they'll even respond to you 3 days, 5 days. The other day, I was telling a CEO of a hospital. I went to his site. Then they have an omni-channel. There's some WhatsApp. They responded for me 6 days later, 6, 7 days later. I said, hello, do you have an MRI? The guy responded me 7 days
that
later.
That wouldn't be an impossible thing to fix.
It is easy to fix.
If we recognize that is a key part of the,
exactly.
of the proposition.
You know, in my Ponea business, that's what I sell. Patient journey-driven transformation, right? Let me tell you, to try and convince a hospital CEO that the patient should be at the center of the journey, they don't even know. They don't even care. For them, it's, I build infrastructure, they will come. They will queue, they will pay me.
But the one who does
will move forward.
Set themselves apart.
Exactly.
And the standard will be raised.
Yes, but even when I look at a billboard, sometimes I look at a hospital billboard, I say, this billboard, what is it trying to communicate? then next to it is another billboard, maybe of a liquor store or some whiskey. This whiskey billboard has a better conversation than this. Some guy reading some image like this. So I asked myself, like, what was this billboard about? So coming back to medical tourism, when you go to when you go to India, the game has totally changed. Now, when you look at how much billions India is raking, okay, from that, it's significant. So you then go to Ethiopia. Ethiopia has figured out that they have to be the biggest hub of African medical connect. So Ethiopian Airlines. So it means they'll connect you to India. But within Ethiopia, I think they're trying to set up a massive hospital, that's what I heard, to allow patients to stay over as they connect to India. You see, it takes significant thought leadership, significant as what he it's mentally, as I'm saying, are we within our realm as a society, ourselves? Are you going to be able to see this mental transformation of a country within the time we're alive?
It's possible.
I'm truly hoping so.
It's very possible. I usually give little examples. And you remember during COVID, the government asked everybody to stay indoors. And people stayed indoors. Some people were starving, but they were indoors. Also, there's a time the government came up with an edict that as you drive into the city, you needed to slow down to, was it 40 kph? We are coming from Naivasha near Odhiru, on Mombasa Road near City Cabanas. They had this traffic rule that said you need to drive at 40. And I remember for the longest time, even though they were actually not checking after some time, there was no enforcement. Every time people drove from Naivasha and they're overtaking each other at 130 and 40 kph, when they got to Odhiru, all of a sudden the car slowed down. Okay, what am I trying to say? Or even the Mishuki rules with the matatus and wearing uniform and all those kind of things and seatbelts. So that's what I'm saying. It's very easy to turn around a country. People are ready to be led, and people are law-abiding. And so the moment you start letting people know and leading them and showing them why it's a better place and inspiring to that better place and allowing for enforcement, it's going to happen overnight. The developed countries of this world, if they did not have a structure in terms of the law and the enforcement of that law, they would be as wild as, actually maybe worse than some of us. You see some of these expatriates that come to Kenya, they're coming from like pretty well-organized traffic environments.
They become like
but when they come here, they get the biggest four-wheel drive and they're, punching into, cars. Actually, the first thing they do is they're taught defensive driving. And they become some of the worst offenders in traffic. So basically what I'm saying, with the right environment, Kenyans are ready. They're ready to be led, and we can actually turn around this country in our lifetime. And when I say this, I'm not even talking at the highest level of leadership, even within our businesses, okay? Within the micro level of organization within the country, whether it's a parastatal or a business or even your family. It's all about leadership and what standard you want to see. And that can happen overnight. It can happen in 10 to 15 years. This country can be amazingly different if we chose that field.
You see, I think we've hit today. You see, I told you, I started by saying, you never know. We can be here for 3 hours. You don't even realize we are at 2 hours, 45.
I didn't know that was literal.
Yeah, it is. Because you see, what happens mentally, you realize that we are busy out there with our lives, like Wandia said. But for me, at Founders, what I'm trying to do is give you a place where you start doing reflection. I'm sure out of this conversation, you've probably thought a few things about your life or your business, and that, I think that's why we are trying to do this, and as we now try and close this, it's really to have some sort of personal reflection, to ask yourself what it isn't structured. Just asking yourself, if you're to forward pay this conversation to anyone who is listening, even from your own point of reflection, right? what would be your closing conversation on this, right? I think we've said many things. Ian has said that he thinks we can achieve this move in much shorter period. That's what we've said. But leadership at what all levels is key, correct? I think we've said that we also need to love and consume our products, right? But at the expense also, and I read somewhere the amount of counterfeit in this market is at another level. That's another thing. From the drinks we consume, right? From whatever. How can we also be able to move forward when we are the biggest consumers of counterfeit as a country? So that's also a significant contradiction. Isn't it?
No, it's not.
As a country, is it a contradiction?
It's the same denominator. No enforcement, poor leadership in terms of enforcement. Because if overnight you came and said everything that's happening at the light industries, we know where. You know, if it's a fake brand, it should not be produced, and ensure that the standard of quality has to be achieved before you put your brand in the market. Then you'll not be having a thriving counterfeit market. But we've allowed it. There's little enforcement. At the leadership level, at all levels, people have allowed it. And that's because from an ethical point of view, unfortunately, our country is like deteriorating at a very, very fast rate. It's what Stephen Covey was saying many years ago. Character was a very big thing in society, but now we've moved to, we're moving from the inside out to the outside in. So it's how I appear, it's how much money I have, it's, my fame and those kind of things. And so this is what the people that should be leading, and when I say this, again, it's not necessarily at the highest level, but at all levels, are valuing. And by valuing those things, quick money, appearances, being seen to have made it, then they're allowing things that should never happen in this country. In Europe, they used to have, you remember in Europe, they had the plague. Okay, why do you get a plague? It's because the place is dirty. Okay, there are rats, all over. They also had a flu that killed a lot of people. They also had during the Industrial Revolution, they have kids that used to work in factories, smoke-filled factories. And that's not too long ago, probably 150 years, 160 years. That's how Europe was. But one day they woke up and they decided to have a social contract. And they decided how they wanted the future to be. And so that's the conversation that we will need to have in this country. Otherwise, as long as we continue allowing that character deterioration, moral values deterioration, and we really don't care, then we're going nowhere. We'll consume counterfeit. 90% of our product will continue being counterfeit.
See, that's what I meant in terms of how we can close this conversation without realizing. You've answered yourself. You've done a great job by laying the future of what you think it could look like, right? Jesse, for you, how do you see, maybe what would be your concluding position? And you see, we've come from, again, founder-led, business-led, then only realizing business can only operate in an environment where also the brand where you're operating under as a country becomes significantly important. And I'm sure even where you expand your brand as M-KOPA also determines the countries you go to. The issues that Ian has raised are also very, very critical, correct? So what would be your closing position on this?
Well, definitely to the comments you made a couple minutes ago here, it's been a really reflective and sort of fluid conversation that I've really enjoyed. Like, I've learned a lot. I've formed some thoughts in my head that I didn't have when we got in here this morning, so thank you for that. Most of my thoughts are coming back to the beginning of the brief you gave us, founder-led brands versus companies that are, where the founder isn't as much as that a part of that equation. The big unlock for me to think about this going forward is different brand treatments for different audiences. Again, customers, investors, staff, and other partners. Each of those can be played quite differently in our case, and I suspect in many entrepreneurs' cases, and it's important to me to now use my time and my personal brand differently depending on the audience, more or less, right, in different applications. The second thing that, for my own reflection, was most helpful here is that, and I think the analogy is pretty tight. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. If you want to go fast, the founder brand is an extremely quick and effective way to build currency. But if you want to go far and long, you want to build something that's beyond one individual's career, lifetime, etc. And so that's where the company that you're building, the brand of that company has to supersede any individual, right? Apple superseding Steve Jobs. And I'll end with one remark. One of our favored greatest investors in M-KOPA today is Sumitomo Corporation, which is a big Japanese investment house. And when they were considering to make a pretty significant investment into M-KOPA a few years ago, I went to dinner with one of their senior executives, and he said, "Jesse, I only have one question for you tonight. Sumitomo Corporation can trace its roots back 400 years. Where will M-KOPA be 400 years from now?" True story. It was his only exam question. And I was so moved by the question, because had any of my other investors ever asked me, where will M-KOPA be in even 40 years, never mind 400 years? And to think of it in that context of, okay, Sumitomo's gone from 16 whatever to 2025. And now I'm being asked, this company that we started in 2010, where might it be in 2040-10 or whatever, 2410? It totally changes your frame of reference. And clearly, to make a 400-year-old company, if that's anybody's aim, is to create something that's far beyond, any individual, but speaks to a much deeper set of values and proposition and product and everything else.
Wow. It's an interesting conclusion, because when we had our episode 3 about capital, that was one thing that came up. And you talked, Sumitomo is a large investor in your business, which I'm happy to hear, because when we looked at investors, another issue was you're so misaligned. Like some of them just want certainty. Just tell me, I put 10 million, when am I going to get exit? You, on that side, you want growth. But it's interesting, we just talked about significance. So really what Sumitomo was trying to do, they had put significance of a return in your value proposition. So that's a great investor to have on board, because it means they are pushing you, not for certainty, but more for significant. Great. Great sharing that. One day, not to say that we want to give you the great closing position.
Oh dear, no pressure. Well, first of all, thank you. I've really also enjoyed this conversation. Lots of food for thought. One of our missions at Vivo is to build African fashion brands that will still be here in 100 years. We haven't yet thought about 400, but we definitely want to build beyond any one individual. And so what does that mean from the fundamentals, from the clarity around, why we're here, who we're here to serve, what impact we're trying to have. And I think that the power of brands, whether it's your personal brand, your business brand, the country brand, the whole conversation around counterfeit, for me, in a way, if people are making counterfeits of your brand, it means your brand has been very successful. And so what we don't see is African brands being copied. It's the Nikes that are copied. It's the Johnny Walkers. So to a certain extent, we want to build those kind of brands that others will try, hopefully fail, but will try to counterfeit. And I don't think as a continent we have understood the power of owning and shaping the way our creating brands and shaping that future. And in doing so, and in not doing so, we give away so much of the value. And so if there's one message it's that we should be so careful and thoughtful about the importance of the brands we're building. And I think on the question of leadership, I mean, I have very little interest in politics. I know it's necessary, a necessary evil. But I personally don't spend too much time engaging or even thinking about it. But I think we all have the opportunities to be leaders in our own rights. And for those of us that are building businesses that do employ hundreds of people or will have that kind of influence, hopefully we will be building leaders of tomorrow, because those people will in turn go and build their businesses one day or be part of something else. And so, you know, can we build the businesses where people want to poach from because they recognize that people who have worked there have learned a particular way of working or have worked within a particular culture that's going to be, I mean, the companies that are known, you know, people go to look for when they're trying to hire. I'm sure you've had that in your businesses as well, and I think that's a good thing too. You know, I think we're not here by accident. In a way, we've been blessed. We didn't, you know, it's not because we have any inherent talent that's better than everybody else. It's because we were lucky in many ways. We grew up in certain homes, we were guided, we were mentored, we got certain opportunities, and we are where we are. And what can we give back? This is a continent that needs our generation to do something differently, because our parents gave us opportunities. I'm not sure that as a generation we are serving the generation that's coming behind us. You know, when we see 40% unemployment, when we see people who go to medical school and get a degree but can't get a job, we have failed. You know, so I mean, we can blame politics, we can blame whatever, but if anything, you know, trying to create brands and businesses in sectors that can grow and that can mushroom, and many more M-KOPAs can come along, I think that will be the legacy that we can leave behind. But on the entrepreneur out there who's, this is where I started, it's where I'm going to end. I think to the extent that your personal brand can help grow a good business, that's a good thing, but your business has to stand and speak for itself.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing. It's great. I think my closing position, having had this last 3 hours, it's really around country brand. And as Ian spoke about character, I am left to conclude and think, where are we as a country brand in terms of character, in terms of our soul as a country? And I'm also want to close by thinking, what's the future of where are the Gen Zs that, in quotes, we're keeping referring to, and what aspiration do they have from a brand point of view as a country brand? Maybe the uneasiness we are having today with that generation is because they can't relate to anything tangible that they call a country brand. And maybe we need to go back and rethink, what are we as a country in terms of a brand point of view? And why is that generation not having any aspirational thought processes around our country brand? And maybe the way to quell that energy is a whole rethinking of who we are as a country from a brand point of view, as you said, character. Because if you're saying we are consuming counterfeit, we're doing this, people think get rich is this way, then we have a problem in our hands. I think we need to rethink our country as a brand such that this same Gen Z or whoever, when they go out there, they proudly say, I'm Kenyan. And I want Kenyan to say we're the greatest athletes, because that's an individual pursuit. Kipchoge is an individual pursuit. It's what becomes our collective country brand. And with that, I want to thank you guys for coming, and ladies. And it's been interesting, as you can see. And I always tell entrepreneurs to show up. Sometimes this conversation could be the turning point for many other people when they listen to you. And trust me, they listen to what you guys say. I want to thank you, Andia. Thank you for coming. Again, thank you for coming, and you'll start getting lots of speaking gigs. You'll see based on your conversation, because we'll put your LinkedIn profile there. You'll see lots of people reaching out to you. And Jesse, thank you for coming through. And I guess as we close, we want to thank all our audience and say, look, every day we learn. Every day we learn from others. Every day we shape the future generation of entrepreneurs and founders who, when they listen to us, they learn. And it's through this sharing that we build the next generation, maybe that what I've been asking about, the next Kenya brand. Thank you for listening. And thanks all of you guys for coming. Bye.
Thank you.